Somali Bantu and Somali Cushitic history in Somalia. Every country has its unique historical background that holds its culture and social economic life. Somalia was among the top and best traders during ancient times. Also, Somalia gained independence from 1940 to 1941 from British and Italian colonialism. The leading British aim was to establish a place to carry on trade. And they were not interested in resources. However, each group shared their own culture, their own language. But a similar Islamic religion brought Somali interests and goals together. For example, living harmoniously together. Despite the Cushites repaying good with good, the Cushites went ahead and denied the Bantu children the right to education in collaboration with the government. This article intensively discusses Somalia's resettlement and transition from informal to formal education. Colonization. Its impact on the Somalia community. Discrimination. An introduction to education. Meanwhile, before the British colonization in Somalia, people shared a complex and comprehensive educational background where the eldest used to educate young children through storytelling, guidance, and counseling. Scientific research shows that at around 700 AD, the Arab had intermingled with the Somali people, causing a significant influence in religion, which caused almost all the Somali people to be converted to the Muslim faith. Afterward, the Islamic religion had a considerable effect and managed to open Quranic schools with the standard of colonial power, which was the only formal education in Somalia. Many citizens joined the school with the aim of learning and becoming converts to Islam. The Somali Cushite and Somali Bantu lived in peace before colonization, respected each other, and protected one another. After the Italian colonization, things changed drastically since the Italians were not after their resources but their workforce labor as slaves. First, the Bantus and the Cushitic people in Somalia lived separately before colonization. Furthermore, there is an exciting history of the Bantus and the Cushitic people. For centuries, the Somali Bantus and the Somali Cushites lived in Somaliland harmoniously. At that time, they lived in different regions. The Somali Bantus later migration from their original homeland in Cameroon and Nigeria in West Africa dates back to 3,000 years ago. The continued expansion of the tribe's search for water for their crops was the main reason for their migration. From West Africa, the Bantu community migrated eastward, with some staying in Central and East Africa, while some traveled as far as Southern Africa. Of the two groups in the country, the Bantu arrived there first, 2,500 years ago, and settled in the southern part of the country, rich in arable land. When they arrived in the area, they just settled down in the south part of the area, especially around and between the Juba and Shabelle rivers. However, they did not move to the northern side because it consisted of drylands. The drought was the leading cause of the Somali Bantu and Somali Cushite migration, hence their parting of ways. Furthermore, many years later, the Cushitic Somalis migrated from their original homeland in northern Africa, known as Sudan's modern-day area. In detail, this was 500 years later, after the Bantus had inhabited the region of southern Somalia. Specifically, they had traveled from North Africa to search for green pastures for their cattle. However, when the Cushitic Somalis arrived in Somalia, they found out that the Bantus had already inhabited the southern area. They had no other choice but to stay on the northern side since nobody was living there. Generally, the land was peaceful as no group interfered with the affairs of the other. Still, each group defended its territory. In their subgroups, they governed themselves for many generations. It is now clear that the Bantus and Cushites coexisted in the country, searching for food, water, and land to cultivate. Italy colonized part of Somaliland in the early 1900s. They took control of the Bantu and the Cushitic groups' two regions, and they combined the two areas as one country. Some Cushitic from the northern side started moving slowly to the Bantus area in the southern region in search of food. They looked weak, thin, starved, and tired as they had walked for a long distance without food. They used to show up at the Bantu house as a beggar. Due to their state at the time, the Bantus did not realize that the Cushitic group could be dangerous. Thus, after the Cushitic members had expressed their needs, the Bantu, out of their generosity, decided to offer help. They gave them food and shelter as they sympathized with the sickly state of their visitors. The Cushitic gladly received a warm welcome. Nonetheless, The Bantu only adhered to their moral practice of welcoming those who needed their help and forgot to be cautious as they were dealing with strangers whom they did not fully understand. Henceforth, the Bantu and the Cushitic started living together. The Bantu shared their resources with the Cushitic and made sure that they were well fed. As a result, the Cushitic were established in the Bantu region. Many years later, the colonizers started building schools in the Bantu and Cushite areas. The Cushites who were living in the Bantu areas used to warn them not to go to school as if they cared for them, while the Cushite children themselves were going to school. When the Bantus asked why, one of the justifications the Cushites gave was that the schools taught the Christian faith and would lead their children away from Islam. The Cushitic people acted as if they cared for the Bantus while lying to them and deceiving them. Their situation was just like the prophet Adam and the devil's story. The devil told Adam to eat from the tree that would make him immortal, acting as if he cared about him. This same misconception misled many Bantus. As a result, many of the Bantus never acquired formal learning. They remained illiterate while the Cushites educated their children. Later, as the colonizer left the colony, Somalia gained independence. However, the chosen leader came from the Cushitic group because the Cushites collaborated with the colonizer and were educated, unlike the Bantus. Therefore, the government belonged to the Cushite people after the colonizers left the colony. Afterward, the Cushite-led government wanted nothing to do with the Bantus since the government was in the Cushites' hands. Thus, constant conflicts emerged between the two groups as the Cushites often acted against the Bantus. Still, the Bantus let the Cushitic group lead the country, due to their desire for peace to prevail in the region, and they started sending their children to government schools. However, this did not improve the situation. The government continuously discriminated against and deceived the Bantus. For instance, when the Bantu children graduated from high school, the government gave their diplomas to the Cushites who had not graduated and then transferred them to other countries. Consequently, many Bantu children finished high school but have no diplomas. The government did so to kill the Bantus hope in the country. This way, the Bantu people will never have opportunities to join the government. Somali Bantu faced more discrimination and harassment when Siad Barre became president. The government refuses to accept the rights of Bantus, leaving them to be an insignificant group. First, it has been discriminating against them since the country got its independence, and it has blocked every opportunity to evolve. It also has blocked all the schools in the Bantu area because the government does not want the Bantu children to have better futures. As per the government, Bantus are not Somali Cushitic or Muslim. Therefore they should be deprived of their basic identity, which is their homeland. However, all the Bantus are in fact Muslims and belong to Somalia. Second, President Siad Barre used to take the Somali Bantus wealth by force as a tax and separated it according to a 2:1 ratio, dividing the stolen wealth among his people who were living in the countryside because most of them were destitute, and the government lacked the funds to feed them. Third, the government started killing them silently to reduce their number, and it doesn't want the whole world to notice its evil deeds. The reason behind this is that they look different from other Somali Cushite groups. Therefore, given the Italians' reigns, the Somali-led government started discriminating against and deceiving the Somali Bantu. In conclusion, the historical record shows that before the Italians invaded Somalia during the colonial era, Somalia's territory was separated into two geographical regions, each occupied by Bantus and Cushitic communities, respectively. During this period, the Somali Bantus enjoyed control over Somalia's southern part, and the area flourished in peace. Following the emergence of Italian colonial control over Somalia, they combined the two locations. Some of the Cushitic people from northern Somalia began moving in the Bantu southern region slowly, and the Bantus welcomed them with open arms and without any caution. When Somalia got its independence, the colonizer let the Cushitic people control both regions. That produced catastrophic consequences as the Cushitic-led government instituted oppression, discrimination, and corrupt governance. Therefore, the harsh and unfriendly treatment of the Somali Bantus stems from a mistake made by their ancestors in the colonial era.